Is consumer choice an illusion when shopping at grocery stores? Let's talk about it. Before we get started, make sure to hit that like, comment, and subscribe button, as you are always constantly supporting my eco-educational work and I would not be here today without you. When you step into a grocery store, most people will see an overwhelming variety of choices, and that's just the thing. Is there really such a wide variety? Corporations like Kraft, Heinz, General Mills, and Unilever, and in their parallel sectors, have seized control of their markets and supply chains. These corporations are economic forces on par with small countries and have taken advantage of weakened regulations to grow and influence. Think about how corporations merge when we think of it as a good thing, when in reality it is not. The result is a handful of private interests have direct control of what American farmers grow, how much they make, what we eat, and how much our groceries cost, which is very alarming because this is counter to food, land, and seed sovereignty. In my view, I believe that the privatization of fertilizers, herbicides, insecticides has created a global environmental injustice and a parasitic and reliant system in which farmers must partake in, or else they're not able to grow food. I personally go shopping and I try my best to find something that is sustainable, but who controls that brand at the end of the day? People tend to think that consumers are the ones suffering the most, and we frame the conversation around making the quote-unquote sustainable choice. But in reality, we need to talk about the influence these corporations have and the farmers in the supply chain that get stuck in an endless cycle of debt due to government's negligence to oppose food titans and giant corporations to merge. And this is because of the unchecked power and weak regulations that are set in place in America's democracy. Additionally, since these corporations often control their supply chains, that means that farmers and packers and others involved have the least amount of power, and they suffered as a result, whether that's through labor exploitation or whether that's the economic reliant system that they operate in. And food supply chain workers have talked about these issues with safety over being overworked, and it's clear that people aren't willing to stand for the abuse from these corporations. We've seen the boycott of Kellogg's recently. We're constantly seeing how labor unions are being shut down by these corporations. The strikes from workers at Kellogg are one of the small steps on this journey to reclaiming power. The rise of labor movements of our generation's opportunity to challenge the systems that have enabled those corporations to have so much power. I've recently made a post about Amy's Kitchen allegedly abusing their employees, and while they're a privately owned company, they're still a good example of how companies take advantage of vegan or sustainable branding that can still be guilty of exploitation. And I know this post is focusing on larger systems of injustice rather than individual choice, but I'm still boycotting them, and you should too. And I have other videos that have talked about this issue that you can find on my page. Antitrust experts say that markets are dangerously controlled once 4 firms control 40 to 50% of the market share. In the case for our food, 4 firms or less control at least 50% of the market for almost 4 out of 5 grocery items like pork, coffee, cookies, beer, and bread. Think about other things too. For every sale happening at a grocery store, about 64% are going to one of these major players, which is why I always argue that planting grocery stores isn't going to fix the issues of, for example, food apartheids or environments where people don't have access to healthy food. All of these mergers and acquisitions have led to a dangerous concentration in power. There's less competition in the market, less voice for the worker, less say for the consumer, and less ability to regulate and protect. And all of this is solely for the express purpose of concentrating more wealth in the hands of the elite at the hands of these corporations. In the food systems that we see designed today, farmers only get an average of 15 cents for every dollar, and this was low as 0.08 cents per dollar as recently as 2 years ago. So we should point out how ruthlessly efficient these companies are. As another indicator of their monopoly, these companies reported making record-breaking profits during the pandemic, and the profit margins for top meat companies like Tyson Foods were up over 300%, with Tyson earning around $1.36 billion in 2021's fourth quarter, over twice as much as the year prior. So in the United States, Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, even commented on this, saying companies are raising prices because they can. And this is so true, in which we've seen how the pandemic has shown supply chains are being disrupted due to international laws and the rise of exploitation happening. It's laid out in the open, but there are so many things that we can do to feel better as consumers. And I want to feel good about the food I purchase and nourish my body, but with these reports of injustices that have highlighted that a majority of options, a supermarket will help the line to pocket of billionaires and market-controlled companies that carelessly exploit the people in our communities, we must think about localization and the concept of using as much little resources as possible. We can't wait for the same political system that enabled this careless seizure of power to correct itself. Instead, there are some steps that I've been trying to consider in trying to reclaim our food system and to create a system that is focused on power, meaning a power of our duty to respond to natural earth. We can't wait for the same political system that enabled this careless, unchecked power to correct itself. Here are some practical steps towards reclaiming our food system and to ensuring that farmers and our packers are the ones centered in these conversations. Tip number 1 is to support organizers and politicians that actively help enact antitrust policies. Get involved with their local political campaigns. The other tip I offer is that challenging corporate influence lies at the heart of many environmental and social issues. So anything you can do to practice reductivism also helps, and be in those conferences or be in those rooms and challenge these corporations, as they are afraid of us when we ask these questions. Another tip I offer to everyone is to connect with your local food systems. Is there a farmer nearby in your area? Do you have a farmer's market located? You can find out all about the food that is grown in your area by just asking. And the other thing is, try growing food in your own place. I know that for a lot of us, it can be sometimes hard to find places to grow our own food, whether we don't have access to a backyard or the soil is contaminated. So consider actually growing your own herbs and vegetables inside a small plot in your apartment or home. The other thing is to identify and research brands that build your own agency. Yes, a lot will be owned by large parent brands, but you still need to eat. At the end of the day, I always tell people, if this is something that you need for your life, then you should get it. The last thing I would recommend is focus on helping enable larger systemic changes, but let your actions empower you all the while. And this is something that is so important to me, because I think that a lot of us don't always believe that we don't have as much economic or political power to create change, but when we come together and build power amongst each other, we have so much more collective power. If you really appreciated this video about consumer choice and groceries, let me know what you think about in the comments below, and make sure to give me a like, comment, and subscribe, because I really love hearing from all of you, and I really think that grocery shopping, examining these power dynamics in the food system, is what's going to make us understand more of what we want to create change for.